Well, tubers, too bad. And of course, my favorite group of all, crazy people. Will this Filipina exploit you? Is the title of this video. Well, there's a lot of talk about Filipinas meeting guys and simply using them as walking ATMs. They're just moving targets. In this video, what I want to do is not debunk it, but what I want to do is I want to kind of throttle it back a little bit to what I feel is a more realistic viewpoint of that. Do people get exploited? Yes. Do men get exploited? Yes. Do Filipinas get exploited? Yes. In this, I'm going to give you two primary examples. One of a major exploitation that happened when I first came to town that I heard about firsthand. I'm going to share my own experience of being exploited. And then I'm going to try to offer up a few examples of ways that I think you can avoid being exploited or being the exploitee. All right, so here comes my little video. Well, like I mentioned in the introduction, I'm going to go over a couple of stories, true stories. One with a gentleman that I met initially here, and this guy I'm going to talk about first because he really got taken to the cleaners. But I think you're going to come to the same conclusion that I did once you hear the story. And please understand, I heard this 7 years ago. I was not in town for more than 1 week, and the fog was just sort of starting to lift off of me from having first gotten here and finally settled into an apartment and spending that week trying to get settled in and arranged and organized. And you can imagine the first week's always hectic. And I decided that I was going to go to Robinson's and have a cup of coffee and just chill out and be alone with me, myself, and I and my thoughts for a while. And because I had been go up till that point. Well, I was alone with me, myself, and I for about 10 or 15 minutes when this guy, this white dude, just comes and just sits down with me and says, "So where are you from?" And kind of took me back a little bit, and I told him where I was from. And I don't mean to be demeaning, especially looking the way that I do. I know that I'm not exactly what you'd call the freshest selection out there when it comes to looks. But this guy was flat out ugly. And not only was he ugly, he had just features about him that were, to me, borderline grotesque. This big bulbous nose that was kind of bent, it probably been broken a few times. His eyebrows looked like caterpillars. You know, he had a tarantula, it looked like growing out of his ear. Telling you that his shirt looked like he had it on for 3 days. And he was just kind of a rambunctious, very assertive, loud, and obnoxious guy. Very pushy. At that time, it's no longer there, but there used to be a Bo's Coffee right along the walkway into Robinson's. And that's where I had decided to sit on the outside. I was going to smoke a cigarette. I was going to have a cup of coffee and just be with my thoughts. And he kept going back and forth inside of Bo's Coffee, demanding they hurry up and fill up his free water because he's entitled to free water. So he did that 2 or 3 times while we were together. And like I said, he just kind of pushed himself on me. And I think it was just because he had nothing to do and all day to do it. And I was there, and I was a white guy, and he knew I spoke English. And he just kind of pounced on me. So that's the setup to him and I meeting. I couldn't tell you his name. I met him the one time. I haven't seen him since, thanks God. But he told me this story. And I think once you hear the story, you'll feel the same way about the guy that I did back then. His story was number one, it was obvious that he was girl crazy. And so he talked to me a lot about himself, that he had $1 million when he first came over here, and now he was down to $500,000. And I said, well, how did that happen? And so he proceeded to tell me that he had met this beautiful 19-year-old girl that was just, did anything and everything for him. And one of the first things he did was he pulled out his phone. This isn't my phone, but he said, look. And I looked, and it was a picture of her naked. Well, I had this big naked picture of some 19 or 20-year-old girl, and I had to admit, I said, yeah, man, she looks like a Playboy playmate. I don't blame you. You're a lucky fellow. And he said, well, we're not together anymore because I'll tell you what, man, she was giving me a massage every night. She was doing, I'll leave out the graphic parts, but you could fill them in, what he said. And I decided to go help her family, and I was going to build her a house. And I said, no kidding. And he said, yep. I went, and we went to whatever island or whatever place he went to. I don't remember. It was 7 years ago. And he basically said that the minute that the last nail went into the last piece of wood, and he set the hammer down, because he was a contractor back in the States and knew everything about that. And he had spent, I forget the amount, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on this place. Don't really recall. She booted him. I mean, right then, right there, right now, done, over, get off, you're trespassing, you come back, we'll call the police. I don't want nothing more to do with you. So he pretty much got put together by this beautiful, young, vivacious Filipina for a brand new house and whatever else I guess you could get out of him. And I thought, well, you weren't really thinking with the old big head there anyway to begin with. But I felt I said, that's a rotten thing to do to somebody. And he says, well, it gets worse. And I said, why? What's that? And he says, well, I met another one. I said, did you? And he goes, yeah. And he thumbs through his phone. Hand to God. And he goes, look. Another naked picture. I'm like, wow, another Playboy playmate there for you, pal. And I won't bore you with the gory details because I don't really remember them all that much, but pretty much the same conclusion. The second time the last nail went into the last piece of wood and the last door was hung and the last window was closed, out you go. That's it. Over and done with. And at that point in time, now first time that he told me about the first house, I had a little bit of empathy for the guy, even though I could tell that I couldn't see anybody, much less a beautiful 20-year-old Playboy playmate material being with him to begin with. But okay, you made a mistake. The second time, I thought, you know what, dude, you should have learned from the first one. Then he proceeded to tell me, are you ready for this? 3 times. One more. He did it all over again. And again, he showed me the picture. And by now, I thought, you know what, dude? I didn't say it to him because he was very confrontational, like I mentioned before. He's very aggressive. He was very this rude, obnoxious kind of guy. Like I said, he just sat down without asking when I was sitting there by myself and started to unload on me and wanting to know all about where I was from and what I was doing and what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong and blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, how am I going to get rid of this guy? And by the time he told me about house number 3, I said, you deserve it. And wouldn't you know, just as I was thinking, how am I going to get away from this guy? By the grace of God, his phone rang. And he told me, hey, I got to go. I got to go to Mindanao. I got this hot chick. I'm going to go meet her. And he just took off. Like that. I mean, no goodbye, no nice meeting you, no thanks for, no nice hanging around, have a good day. Just, I got to go meet her. And ran, literally ran away. And I was thinking, where's the picture? I didn't get to see the picture of number 4 here. And that is, so far, in the 7 years I've been here, probably one of the top 3 at least being exploited. But in my mind, and I'm pretty sure you're thinking the same thing I am, he let himself be exploited. He set himself up to be exploited. Did the girl exploit him? Yeah. Do desperate people do desperate things? Yeah. That's just the law of the jungle, man. I mean, that's just the way it rolls. I'm going to tell you now about how I felt I got exploited. And a little different ending on all of this. I used to hang out with a crowd of 2 or 3 ladies, and we were platonic friends, and got along great, had a good time, and it was either me or if there was another guy along, we always picked up the check, because it was just kind of the gentlemanly thing to do. Again, I'm new in town. Now I'm in town for 3 or 4 months, and I've made some friends, and we're kind of hanging out and running around and doing some nightlife stuff. And we were at a bar called Bogart's. It's now a different name. And it had a back room, and it's a whole different scene today. But back in the day, that's where we would go, and we would have a great time. And honestly, me and a couple other guys would be there. We'd split the tab. They'd pick it up. The girls always went for free. And that was fine and dandy with everybody. The night never cost me more than 20, 25 bucks. And I didn't mind it. But that one night I went with 2 ladies. 2 ladies. And as we were walking from Bogart's, we decided we were going to go to the world famous Why Not that night. And as I was walking along with them, both the ladies were texting on their phones. And I'll leave the names out of it. But one lady I was with, she said, "Hey, Paul, do you mind if, let's say that her name's Jane. Do you mind if Jane comes along?" I said, "Nah, it's fine. It's cool." I knew it was on my dime. And it was 100 pesos to get into the Why Not, and they gave you a drink ticket for a beer. So it was kind of a push in a way. It was an entrance fee, but not really. Well, by the time I said I was walking with 2, now this Jane comes along, which is a made-up name. By the time we got from Bogart's to the Why Not, there were, are you ready for this? 9 people, including myself. A total of 8 people had been texted and said, "Hey, we have the proverbial sponsor here tonight, me, and you'll get in free to the Why Not. Come on down, get a free beer." And when they showed up, I took a look around me, and I saw what was happening. And I looked at the one woman and I said, "Oh, a couple extra mouths to feed, huh?" And she just sort of laughed it off, thinking I was making a joke. And I sort of was, and I sort of wasn't. And so I didn't bail. I went ahead. I was a big boy. I paid his way in, let him have a good time. I didn't want to be a swell sport. I went in and drank my beer, and really just didn't have any desire to stay. I don't even know if just so long ago, I don't even remember if I said goodbye or not. I just left, got on my bike, went home. A couple of days later, I get a call from one of the ladies, and she said, "Hey, we're thinking about getting together. You want to go?" And I said, "Absolutely not. In fact, I don't ever want to go out with you again. And I don't appreciate what you did. And I'm not, I thought we were friends. And friends don't do that to friends. So, no." I'm not going. And you know what? She got the message. And later on, we became friends again. But never once again did she ever pull that nonsense. In fact, the next time we did hang out, she picked up the check. I had set a boundary. I had said, no, this is not going to happen anymore. Now, I got beat out of maybe $15. The first guy got beat out of, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. Moral of the story is there are going to be people, women, that are going to exploit you when given the opportunity, and they're good at it, and it's just what they do. But I want to emphasize that that's not the majority. In fact, it's pretty much the exception. Most of the people that I meet, that we know, they start off very, very innocent, very, very naive to some degree. They're just nice. They just want to meet somebody nice if they're in that mode. And where I think the fault lies in many cases is with the guys. I think the guys try to, and I was guilty of it until I realized how less respected I was. I'll get into a little bit more about that. But we're so used to, in America at least, you got to have a nice car and a nice house and a nice this and a nice that to kind of impress the girl. There's another set of ways to impress people over here. And believe it or not, one of them is being frugal. It doesn't, you don't have to have all of this stuff and be the big shot every night and pick up every check. In fact, the respectometer goes down for you because you're kind of being played by a fool. And I think that what a lot of guys do is they're overeager. And I was guilty of it. And they want to be a nice guy. They don't have any real big agenda. They're just trying to be gracious and generous, and they see the way that people live, so they're trying to help them out. And sometimes that leads to more trouble than problems that get fixed. If you throw a bunch of money at somebody that's never handled a bunch of money before, it can really cause chaos in their lives. You've seen it with lottery winners. There's some poor guy bumping along, making, whatever he makes, just an average Joe, maybe a little below average income guy. Those generally who plays the lottery hits it for so many millions of dollars. And we've all heard the stories that a year later, the poor guy's broke. Everybody came out of the woodwork. He spent it. He didn't understand about taxes. He didn't understand about investments. And that's sort of the same dynamic over here. So I was really impressed when I had a conversation recently with a guy that called me up about a week ago, or messaged me rather. He messaged me. And he said, hey, your friends and your wife are friends with so-and-so. And I said, yeah. I said, I haven't heard that name in a long time. I said, I haven't seen that woman in a long time. He said, well, her and I are in an LDR. I said, oh, okay, good deal. Nice lady, and I knew she was. She was a nice lady. He says, but I have a problem. And I said, well, what's that? He said, oh, I just recently discovered that she's got this TikTok, I think, account. TikTok or Instagram or something like that. And he says, and she's putting up all these videos. And it concerns me because women do TikTok and women do Instagram for admiration and attention and to get the attention of men. And if she's on that level of thinking, it's putting my antenna up and it's making me nervous about her now that I've discovered that part of her life. I didn't know she was doing that when we first started talking. And I said, you know what, you bring up a very good point here. Now, my wife does TikTok, but she's a married woman, so she doesn't entertain other guys. My wife has over 1,000 friend requests on her Facebook. She just ignores them. But he doesn't know that. He doesn't know if this woman is accepting the friend request or chatting with somebody else. And I commended him. I said, you know what? I said, I don't know much about TikTok. Even though my wife's on it, I couldn't find her if I wanted to. What kind of deal is she doing? Is it lascivious? Or he goes, no, it's pretty benign stuff. It's kind of harmless. He goes, but I confronted her about it, and she assured me that it was just, her having fun. And I said, well, you know what? I said, I think that's a very, very, very astute observation, and I think you need to be put on guard by that. It doesn't mean she's guilty, because, yeah, these women, they do grow up in large families. They don't get a lot of individual attention. That's why when it's their birthday, it's such a big deal, because it's their day. A lot of times they're one of 8 or 9 kids. So TikTok is one of those ways where they can get that attention that they may have felt that they lacked growing up or whatever. So he's been put on warning there, and he says, I don't want to be exploited, which just gave me the idea for the title of the video. And I said, I don't blame you. So he says, can you contact her? I said, nope. I haven't seen her in a long time. And I've been down that road before with another guy where I tried to vet a girl for him, and it didn't work out so good. And so I would just tell you that forewarned is forearmed, and that you're doing a good job by keeping track of it, and you're not just blowing it off. A lot of guys are just listening to what they hear on the video chats and what they see. He went a little deeper. He discovered her Facebook account. He started checking her out. He started vetting her a little bit, and I don't know if he's been sending her money or not. The flip side of exploitation is, I think, the women take a lot of heat sometimes. The scammers, the this, watch out for this, watch out for that. Yeah, there's plenty of scammers, and we like to talk about that because it's sexy and it's racy and it's kind of unlawful, or it's exciting. I don't know what the way to put it, but it's not boring if you talk about that kind of stuff. But the majority of people are actually good. I think most people are good. I think what the shame is when the Filipinas get exploited by the foreigners, and no one seems to talk about that. The reason this hit home with me was my wife did an interview like 3 years ago with a little lady that was about 21 or 22 at the time, just cute as a button. And I met her one time, and that was when they used to come over to our apartment, and never saw her again. And apparently she got hooked up with a younger guy and got involved in drugs. And May showed me a post the other day. She goes, look at this. Do you remember this girl? And she told me her name. And I said, no, I don't remember that name. You know so many women. How do I keep track of them? She goes, well, do you remember her? And she showed me the original video from a 3 years ago. I said, oh, yeah. I said, she's such a little cutie pie. And I said, how's she doing? She goes, well, look at her now. And she showed a picture, because she's a friend of May's sister's friend or something like that. And it wasn't on Facebook. It was a private picture that was sent to us. She looked like she was about 40. And she just looked like she had been rode hard and put away wet. And unfortunately, I don't have time, and neither do you, to listen to it. Maybe you could just take my word on this one. That's not the first time that I've seen a perfectly fine, innocent, well-meaning Filipina be, I don't want to say used and abused, that's too rough, but to be exploited is, again, going back to the title, by the foreigners. They bring them in, they tell them lies, they tell them that they love them, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and then once they've had their way with them and they've had their fun, away they go. And then they, unfortunately, will sometimes bounce into another guy just like it, and it's sort of a form of dysfunction that starts to formulate. So I just want to say that it goes both ways. When you are chatting with people, well, I shouldn't put it that way. When I am chatting with people, back in the day, I learned an important word. And my wife will attest to this. The word is no. And it's important, I found. Remember the girl that said, hey, you want to go out, after I sponsored 7 or 8 people to go into the Why Not? And my words was no, and I don't appreciate it. That's a very powerful word. And so if it was me and I was to be but I'm just a guy coming over to the Philippines, and the purpose for me coming is to meet somebody, and maybe I'm in an LDR, or maybe I'm just going to wait till I have boots on the ground. I would memorize the word no. When someone asks you for something, of course you're going to buy a soft drink. Of course you're going to pick up lunch. Of course you're going to, maybe pay for a pedicab or something, because, nickels and dimes to you are a lot of money to them. But if I saw a woman, if I was to be single again, and I was to be meeting someone, and I saw that her little flip-flops were worn out, it wouldn't bother me one iota to say, come here, and let's go get you a new set of flip-flops, some new sandals, some new slippers, as they call them over here, and put those on and let that be a gift. That, to me, is a practical investment. There are guys that will walk the woman after knowing her for 3 hours through Robinson's and load her up with, $600 worth of brand new handbags and dresses and rings and perfumes. And it's just setting you up for failure, in my mind. You're setting expectations real high that unless you're really rich, you're not going to be able to keep it. If I was to go walk through Robinson's with that same girl that I bought the slippers for, and she was to point to a handbag and say, wow, that's nice, can I get that? I would say no. It's just not in my budget. And you know what? By saying no and stating it that way, that it's not in my budget to buy you that 5,000 peso handbag or whatever it is she's looking at, does two things. Number one, helps sort the wheat from the chaff. In other words, if she suddenly loses interest in me because I won't ink up for the handbag, well, maybe that's the only reason she's with me, is so that I can buy her stuff. But if she says, oh, I understand that, I actually believe her respect for me will grow, because I'm showing her that I budget my money and I also value the money. And it will show that if she stays with me, that I will value her. And that's kind of the stage that I set when I met my wife. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.